the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging. My name is Carolyn Sutterfield. I'm the chair of the commission. We're glad to have you here today. We will ask our guests please to leave their cameras and microphones off so that all of the commissioners will be able to see and hear each other for conducting the business of the meeting. If anyone is here planning to offer a public comment, that comes up shortly in our schedule. If you have a public comment to offer, you can turn on your camera and wave at me, and I will call on you. You can introduce yourself and where you're from and give your comment there. You have up to 3 minutes. Otherwise, we will just pass quickly over that section, and there will be another opportunity at the end of the meeting during the announcements for anybody who has an announcement to share. Also to put up your hand by clicking on the reactions button and raise your hand, or come on screen and let me know that you have an announcement. So meanwhile, I would like to have all of my commissioners turn your cameras and your mics on and be present, because we're going to do our usual FOIA two-step here, only I am missing. Oh, there he is. He's masquerading as his wife today. Hello, Mike. Your mic is off. Your microphone is off. Okay. In order to conduct this meeting, we have to go through a series of motions, and people who are here regularly know what they are. And the way it works is that I will make a motion, and Mike, as the vice chair, will conduct the voice vote on that. So we'll all have our mics off for this process for the commissioners. All right. So Diane and Mike. Mike, I still show you as muted.
Mike, it might be the earplugs that you have.
Oh,
if you disconnected those from the computer, it might work.
Can't hear you. Okay. Still can't hear you. Right. Connecting to audio, it says now. Okay, do we have audio now? No. All right. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delegate somebody else, and Kathy Muha is our other officer who's present here today.
I know.
Kathy, oh, there. Are you there, Mike?
I know.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. Okay, we've got him. All right. Here we go. You all heard this before. So to conduct this meeting wholly electronically in accord with the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA, the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging needs to establish 3 findings and determinations for the record. I ask you for your patience as we go through this. I'm going to make 3 motions and we will have 3 votes. 1, audibility of members' voices. First, because each member of the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum is participating and that each member's voice is audible, clear, and at an appropriate volume for all other members. I'm going to conduct a roll call. I will ask each commission member participating in the meeting to repeat your name and the location from which you are participating. Please pay close attention to ensure you are able to hear each of your colleagues. Following the roll call, we will take a vote to establish that every member can hear every other member. I will pass the virtual gavel to the vice chair so I can make the requisite motion. Okay, so here we go. My name is Carolyn Sutterfield. I represent the city of Fairfax, and I'm calling from my home in the city. Tom.
I'm Tom Bash. I represent the Springfield district, and I'm calling from my home in Springfield.
Sharon.
I'm Sharon Dreyer. I represent the Lee district, and I'm calling from my home in Springfield.
Martha.
I'm Martha Cooper, and I'm calling from my home in the city of Falls Church and represent the city of Falls Church.
Diane,
Diane Watson. I'm representing the Mount Vernon district. I'm calling from my home in Lorton, Virginia.
Phyllis,
I'm Phyllis Miller Columbi. I represent the Hunter Mill District and I'm calling from my home in Reston.
We'll see.
Joe,
Hi, I'm Joe Hasty. I'm the Providence representative, and I'm calling from my son's home in Malvern, Pennsylvania.
nice. Kathy Muha,
My name is Kathy Muha. I'm the Sully District Representative, and I'm calling from my home in Oakton, Virginia.
Kathleen Hoyt,
Hi, Kathy Hoyt, representing the Mason District, calling from my home in Lincolnia.
Kathy Cole,
I'm Kathy Cole. I'm the Commissioner at Large, and I'm calling from my home in Springfield.
Mike.
Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Okay. Mike Perrell, representing the Braddock District, and I'm struggling to connect from Bethany Beach for this week.
Oh, we're very sorry for you.
Yeah,
You're-
the struggle.
looks like you picked
It's a tough
perfect
job, but
week.
someone's got to do it.
A perfect week to go to the beach. We've gone directly from April to June here. Okay, here's the motion. I move that we have a quorum present via remote connection and that each member's voice can be adequately heard by each other member of the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging. That's the motion.
So, yeah, do you want, did you assign someone else while I was?
Can you hear, could you hear everybody, Mike?
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah,
who
then you
wants
can
to
call
second
for a
that motion?
second and a second
Yeah,
and a vote.
Okay, Phyllis, I see Phyllis's hand up. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand in case we can't hear. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstains? The motion carries.
Good, thank you. Second, having established that each member's voice can be heard by every other member, we must next establish 4 points: the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for public access to this meeting. So here goes. I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that therefore FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by calling toll-free 888-270-9936, code 231525. That's the motion.
Okay, who would like to second that motion? Is there a second?
I second.
See Diane's hand. All in favor, say aye. And raise your
Aye.
hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you, Mike. And finally, as it is required that all matters addressed on today's agenda address the emergency itself, I move that all matters addressed on today's agenda address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. That's the motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
I second.
I see Marcia's hand up. All in favor, say aye. Or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? The motion carries.
Thank you, Mike. I'll take back the gavel here. Okay, next item is review of our agenda. I mentioned in an email I sent to you that I would like to add an item at the end of agenda under new business, which is the virtual Governor's Conference on Aging, which is happening obviously virtually next week, Monday through Thursday. 4 of us, myself, Kathy Muha, Martha Cooper, and Diane Watson are signed up to participate in that conference. but I sent out to you a list of all the sessions in the hopes that you would pick some, and we'll talk about that. So I want to add that to new business. Can I ask somebody to move that we add this discussion to new
So
business?
moved.
Okay, thank you. And a second,
I'll second.
Mike. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? The motion carries. Okay. Approval of the minutes.
Okay, Carolyn.
Yes.
See if we can squeeze in one other addition.
Oh,
Phyllis,
I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah, it's okay. Phyllis and I have had a thought. We wanted to, for an idea related to a topic of this older adult film festival / discussion group. We can add a little topic at the end on that too.
Ah, okay. Actually, we talked about it before, didn't we? Do you want to do it under old business?
We can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not officially listed, but I don't think we need to have a motion to add it to old
Okay, good.
business.
Then we don't need a motion. That's
Okay.
fine. Move on.
All right. Moving right along. So this brings us to the public comment period, and I'm going to look at the list of participants and remind you that this is for comment only, that announcements will happen at the end of the meeting. So I'm looking to see if I have any of our guests whom we're very happy to see and we wish we could talk to you. I don't see a hand up or anybody turning on their camera to make a comment. So I will keep moving along. If I am mistaken, just put on your microphone and say, wait, you missed me. Okay. Otherwise, we will keep going here. We have a guest with us today who is actually going to present, and now there she is. Nicole, you want to turn on your camera? This is Nicole Winans from the ActiveFairfax Transportation Plan. I will just read you what it says on this paper I have, and then I'll turn it over to Nicole because she's going to explain it a lot more. But active transportation is self-propelled, human-powered travel, including activities such as walking, biking, rolling and scooter, wheelchair or stroller, hiking, running, and riding. I think that is horseback riding. Is that the idea? So this new group, ActiveFairfax Transportation, the plan, I won't read any more about it because she's going to tell us and probably show us what they're up to. So welcome, Nicole. We're very glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. And I'm sorry, there's just a helicopter flying over my house right when I turned on my microphone. So I live in Reston, so we have a lot of helicopters. Just a quick introduction. My name is Nicole Winans. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I am an active transportation planner, which means that I spend my whole day developing bicycle facilities or hiking trails, or finding solutions for safety issues on the road. But one of my big projects right now is the development of a updated comprehensive plan for all these type of facilities. So this is the active transportation plan that has been long in the making. We have multiple plans currently already on the books, but it was time for an update. So let me start by sharing my presentation. Okay. So we can dive right in. It's bigger.
Nicole, while you're setting that up, I will just alert people that the closed captioning has been enabled. And so if you need that, you can click on CC at the bottom.
Okay, great, thank you. So during my presentation today, I want to give you an overview over the project, and then also go over the vision, goals, and objectives, which we have developed as part of this project. And then we also, of course, have time for some discussion. So just to give you an overview, as I mentioned, we have multiple active transportation plans currently on the books in Fairfax County. On the left here, you see the countywide trails plan, which has been around for a long time. It was first adopted in the 1970s. And because of this plan, you see a lot of trails in Fairfax County, both hiking trails and paved trails for walking and running or biking. So that plan has evolved over the years, but it has not been fully updated and brought to current standards in a long time. So some of the design recommendation for how wide a trail, for example, should be are way outdated, and if implemented, actually would create some safety issues potentially because the trail may be too narrow. So there's some changes we would like to make to this document to make sure that if a proposed trail is implemented, that it's safe and meets ADA needs, for example, but also helps that the pedestrian and cyclists can share the facility safely. Then we have a bicycle master plan, which is a separate document that's a little bit more recent. It was adopted in 2014. It mostly focuses on street bicycle facilities such as bike lanes or shared streets that are identified as a good route for people that would like to cycle, but also includes a couple paved trails, which are also known as shared use path. And some of them are along roads, but others go through natural areas in Fairfax County. But the ones that are on this plan are very important for commuters. So that's how they differentiate between the trails plan, which has both a transportation and a recreation focus, while the bike plan was a bit more focused on long distance commuting particularly. And then we also have something called special area plans, which you may be familiar with. Those cover the activity centers such as Springfield or Annandale, Tyson. So they have their own plan. And those plans provide some more detailed information on how wide the sidewalks should be and what type of bike facility should be provided, how many lanes for vehicle traffic. And it's done in a more graphical way, as you can see on the right here in the cross section. So now we have all this information. Sometimes they overlap, and sometimes they don't even provide the same information because all these plans were developed at different times, and sometimes they don't talk to each other. So in some cases, particularly in activity centers, we can have up to 3 different recommendations for the same street. So which is confusing for our developers. And of course, staff then has to make a determination what the best facility should be. So it was time to make this update to bring the bike and trails plan together into one document and make sure that that document is in line with the special area plans or vice versa. Then we also have a regional trail network plan, which is not a comprehensive plan from Fairfax County. It's a regional collaboration between DC and the jurisdictions in Maryland and Virginia that imagine this regional trail network, paved trails that are called the Capital Trails Network. So what you see here is a map of the current proposed network. In green are existing facilities, and in orange are proposed or facilities under construction. This is something we would like to update as well. You can see a couple big gaps in our network in Fairfax County. For example, there is no connection along 495 here. We know that that is a new trail that VDOT is building. So this map is a couple of years old, needs to be updated. But we would also like to bring the idea of this regional network and formalize it into the comprehensive plan. So to review the project priorities or goals, so we, as part of this update, would like to plan for a connected and comfortable network of sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that serve people of all ages and abilities. Help engineers design safer facilities, particularly pedestrians. So our trails plan and bike plan didn't have much information for pedestrian facilities. So how, for example, how many crosswalks should be at an intersection, or how to safely design a mid-block crosswalk that is away from an intersection that causes so many fatalities in Fairfax County, the mid-block crossings. So there's no design guidance in the comprehensive plan for the county. In some of the area plans, there's a little bit of guidance, but it hasn't really been applied to the whole county. So this is our first opportunity to have a whole chapter on pedestrian safety and provide those policy recommendations that will help us create a safer and more connected network for pedestrians as well. Then also for the first time on a countywide scale, we would like to work towards enhanced street infrastructure that really help with the comfort of pedestrians, moving along the corridor, such as shade trees for the day and lighting for the night. So lighting is something that came up over and over again in all our interactions with our political stakeholders and key community stakeholders, as well as our public meetings. Most of Fairfax County is pretty dark at night. So, and we also know that our crashes often happen during hours where there's not much lighting. And so there's also there are some elements to this project which are not in the comprehensive plan, but basically provide Fairfax County DOT with a couple of recommendations that are more internal, programmatic. For example, FCDOT every year has an ability to work with our state legislation on providing input on new laws we would like to see. So we will provide a list of recommendations of changes to the current law that may help improve active transportation safety and comfort and convenience, and will allow us to implement best practices, because not all best practices are currently legal in Virginia. So those are some of the changes we are hoping to take a first step towards by pointing them out. So our consultant is poring over all the Code of Virginia and some of the Fairfax County laws to see what laws may need updating in the future. And then in addition, also on the more internal side, provide recommendations for encouragement programs or educational programs. So we know, infrastructure is expensive, but there's other things we can do to encourage the use of our facilities that we already have, increase safety, provide education to all road users to how to share the road safely. So some recommendations on that. And then last but not least, give some insights on priority of improvements. So we have identified about a $10 billion need for active transportation just to fill the sidewalk gaps and the trail gaps, not to build out the world's best system, just to fill the gaps is $10 billion. So how do we spend the limited money we have to get, to have the highest impact? How do we prioritize our needs? And we have done some data-driven analysis to identify the best areas that should have the highest priority, and then, or the type of areas that should have highest priority moving forward. And those will help us, in the next round of funding, which is still a couple of years off. So this is not, that hasn't happened yet, so I can't really present on those priorities yet, but this will be part of the project moving forward as a next step. And there will also be public outreach on that, so we're really interested in your feedback on that particular item as well. So here's the schedule for phase 1 of this project that we're in right now. So this is the only phase that's currently funded. Phase 2, we are searching for funding right now. We are hoping to get it in the fall as part of carryover. But we are plugging away on phase 1, which started last July and is wrapping up this September. And what we focused on in phase 1 was basically the groundwork that we need to make all these updates that I mentioned. So we did a comprehensive review of all the current policy and plans. We looked at the existing conditions, not just from what type of facilities do we have, where are our gaps, but also we did a demographic analysis, as well as a analysis of potential destinations, current active transportation users. So we looked at big data, which uses cell phone data, that the cell phones basically ping every 5 seconds, which means they communicate with the satellite every 5 seconds. And based on how fast that cell phone moves, that software can determine or make a very well educated guess on what type of mode that person is using. Is that a walker? Is that a biker? Or is that someone driving in a car or in a bus? So we looked at some of those distributions of where our current users are, and then where potentially our future users would be, those areas where we would expect high activities, like pedestrian and bicycle volumes, as well as popular hiking trails. And then looked at it from an equity angle as well. So we did an analysis of, where are our communities in highest need of active transportation, and older adults were identified as one of the key target groups that would likely benefit from better access to safer and more convenient and more comfortable active transportation options. Then we started public engagement to prepare for it in the fall, but then we launched in April this year, and we just wrapped up our official first round of public engagement last weekend on Saturday. That was more of a general, we did a survey, tell us everything you would like us to know about active transportation in Fairfax County. But there will be multiple rounds of engagement on more specific outcomes and recommendations. And then we started developing the vision and goals based on what we heard from the community, as well as best practices and what was currently in our plans, including the strategic plan and One Fairfax, and also developing a Safe Streets program plan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Vision Zero, but the goal is to provide some recommendations on how to improve road safety comprehensively in Fairfax County. Not just fixing that one intersection, but finding out what's wrong with that intersection that's also wrong with 100 other intersections. Like, what are the underlying systemic issues that cause problems for all road users? And then we're hoping to get the vision and goals, as well as the safety plan adopted, or at least endorsed by the board in September. And then phase 2 of this project will develop, really dive into the recommendations, develop the network recommendations, as well as an active transportation facility toolkit. So that would say, for example, if you have this type of road with this many vehicles, what is the best active transportation facility to put next to it? So that's not something we had before, and there were no national guidelines on this, but now we have the national guidelines and can follow best practices, and that will help us upgrade our current network to meet the needs of all users and also best practices. And then we also will start to develop the program and policy recommendations and the implementation guidance. So to talk a little bit about our community engagement and the results. So we heard back from about 1,400 community members. We received over 1,000 comments on a virtual map where people could zoom into the neighborhood, drop down a point and explain what was wrong with that location. There was like a barrier to accessing a bus maybe, or accessing a trail, or missing crosswalk or a sidewalk gap. So we heard a lot about basically barriers to walking and biking. but also destinations that people would like to get to. Then we had the second map that we received over 450 comments on, where we showed the current planned network, but asked for additions. So where, for example, where is an opportunity to add to the network, like a new hiking trail through a park, or extend this shared use path to a school, these type of thoughts that were just very high level and not even looking at the feasibility, just we wanted to know, where are our gaps in our planned network. Then we had 12 community meetings, all virtual, unfortunately, but we still got a lot of good feedback there. And from an equity perspective, we knew that we wouldn't reach our key target audience in equity need areas in the virtual format. So we passed out over 2,000 surveys with pre-stamped envelopes in 8 different languages at food distribution sites, and received many surveys back in multiple languages that we were able to analyze. And then for the more general public, we also produce a nice booklet with a map, like a zoomed in map of the general area and the paper survey, and distributed that to the government centers, community centers, and rec centers. And they could just be dropped off at those locations or mailed to us. And then what we heard from the public was that the main reason for active transportation for the majority was for exercise and fun and spending time outdoors, which is not a surprise, particularly during the pandemic, where everyone was a little cooped up at home or teleworking, or just had fewer options to get out safely. So a lot of people took walks or bike rides in the neighborhoods, and that was really reflected in our survey. But many also said they're using active transportation to get to a destination. And the primary destinations here were parks and trails, but as well as businesses and services, such as community centers or health services. And that did not include work. Work was a separate option. And then what we also heard was that there's a desire for safer crosswalks and more crosswalks, as well as a connected, well-maintained sidewalk and trail network, comfortable bikeways, slower roads, street trees, lighting, and more destinations in walking distance. And when we asked about, how would you prioritize the different parts of a street? What is most important to you? The sidewalks and trails was the highest priority, and on-street parking was the lowest. Considering the audience for the survey, of course, that was not a surprise. And then this is just a graphic showing the specific feedback we got, how many people identified barriers to walking and biking in specific locations. And I just want to point out on the right here, you can see on the map where the public could enter new ideas for new trails or bikeways, that the most popular type was a hard surface and hiking trails. The second most popular facility was the soft surface hiking trail. So I mentioned earlier, we did some analysis, and this is not final yet. So I'm just giving you a sneak peek of some of the data-driven analysis we did. So what you see here on the left is Fairfax County broken up into areas by need. The darker areas have the highest need for active transportation facilities based on a variety of categories such as income, age, language barrier, access to cars, or being transit dependent. So you can see where those areas are. This particularly needs a little bit more refinement, because we notice, for example, up here in Great Falls, a dark area showing up that may be skewed by the language barrier. We have a lot of high income expats in Fairfax County. So that map needs a little bit more tweaking to ensure that we really identify the lower income communities and prioritize those, not necessarily anyone that doesn't have English as their first language. And I'm an expert myself, so I can relate. And then on the right, in the middle here, we have an analysis of where our highest demand for active transportation would be expected in the darker areas. And by demand, we mean it's like most likely for people to walk and bike because destinations are closed or there's a cluster of destinations. So it's not necessarily those people will call and ask for active transportation facilities, but those just the land use will generate active transportation users. So you can see our activity centers kind of pop out here: Reston, Tyson's, Route 1 corridor, Springfield, because there's just a lot of commercial activity. And the map on the right here is an overlay of those two. So we put the need and the demand analysis together into one map. And what you can see here in kind of the burgundy brownish color is the areas that have the highest need for active transportation facilities, as well as the highest demand. So those areas are most likely where we should start investing the next round of transportation money, because if there's not enough existing infrastructure to support both the need and the demand. So those would be the higher priority areas. And then the lighter areas would be have a slightly lower priority because there's a lower need, but also lower demand. And now I just want to go over the draft vision goals and objectives that we are going to present to the Board Transportation Committee next week. So you're getting a sneak peek. And if you have any comments on any of these, you can still make changes until later today. But this is also going out for public review this summer after the board had a chance to comment on it. And then again, hopefully these will be adopted in September. And then they will form the foundation for our actual plan development. So here's the vision statement that we put together, which reads: Fairfax County streets, sidewalks, bikeways, and trails are welcoming places where people of diverse races, cultures, incomes, and ages feel comfortable walking, biking, or using other forms of active transportation to safely and conveniently access the widest range of destinations, or to exercise, relax, or spend time outdoors. And then the goals we identified based on that vision statement are 4 goals. So the first one is access and connectivity, provide a well-connected multimodal transportation network that provides safe, comfortable, and convenient mobility options for all residents of Fairfax County. And then the objectives under this goal are pretty high level, so there will still be action items that go under, or strategies that go under each objective to help us achieve those objectives together with metrics. That's the next step. So these are still high level. So for access and connectivity, we have the following objectives: plan and implement a comprehensive and efficient network of comfortable, safe, and well-maintained sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that link neighborhoods and activity centers, and provide convenient access to the widest range of destinations. Meet active transportation needs in all county capital improvement projects and throughout all phases of development. Reduce travel distances by implementing best practices in land use planning, and monitor new trends and technologies and update standards to encourage their use. The next goal is safety and comfort. Increase active transportation user safety and comfort. And the objectives are to adopt a safe streets policy and implement the strategies outlined in the Safe Streets program plan to minimize traffic injuries and fatalities. Pursue policies and incentives that reduce vehicle miles traveled and vehicle travel speeds. Adopt and apply context-sensitive multimodal street and trail design standards that meet best practices and community needs. Monitor effectiveness and update the recommendations as needed. And last, monitor crash factors and provide targeted multimodal education on transportation safety best practices. The third goal is livability and health. Support public health environmental quality, and economic prosperity by providing inviting and enjoyable sidewalks, bikeways, and trails that encourage frequent usage. The objectives read, apply best practices in context-sensitive street design, including wider sidewalks, narrow streets, lower design speeds, and traffic calming measures in residential and commercial areas. Provide supporting amenities such as street trees, pedestrian scale lighting, benches, and bike racks along active transportation facilities, and include placemaking and green infrastructure elements. Maintain sidewalks, bikeways, and trails and supporting amenities regularly to enhance user experience, safety, and comfort. Provide a variety of educational promotional programs and events to boost the use of active transportation facilities and programs. And lastly, we have equity and social justice. Provide an inclusive multimodal transportation system that prioritizes the need of communities of color, low-income communities, and other vulnerable road users, such as small children and caretakers, youth, people with disabilities, and older adults. And the objectives are to adhere to the goal of the One Fairfax policy, apply best practices and inclusive public engagement to adequately determine the utilitarian and recreational active transportation needs of communities of color, low-income communities, and the vulnerable road users, and other vulnerable road users. And prioritize the needs of communities of color, low-income communities, and other vulnerable road users in the funding, planning, design, and maintenance of all transportation facilities. So this is our project website where you can learn more about the project. You can sign up for a newsletter if you're interested to kind of follow along and be alerted about the next outreach period. And this is my email address if you have any additional questions. I'm happy to take any questions you may have about this project.
Okay, I see Kathy Cole's hand up, so I'll let you have the first question, Kathy.
Thank you. I really appreciate the improvements that the county has made along the cross-county trail and the bike lane that recently went in on our street. But there are a couple of comments. Because we're between Old Key Mill Road and Rolling and the Parkway, we are kind of cut off. We can ride our bikes on these lovely trails and bike lanes, but we can't go anywhere because we hit traffic. And while we can use it for recreation, it's not a transportation use. And our sidewalks go nowhere. Once you get to Hunter Village, it was designed as a cut through between a north and south cut through in the 80s, and there are no curbs or sidewalks. So there's no way to walk really safely on Hunter Village. So I'm glad to see that there's a comprehensive plan. I'm glad to see that one of the priority areas is our area. But one of the things that I think needs to be incorporated in putting in bike lanes and those kinds of alternative transportation lanes is that people use the bike lane as the second lane on our road. It becomes the right lane. So I have been passed on the right, even though we have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. People have used the bike lane to pass. And then it's also confusing as to how do you take a turn when you're crossing a bike lane. So I think there needs to be some public education on how to manage driving on roads with bike lanes. I'm a biker and I'm so glad to see it, but it's still a little scary. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment and observation. So yes, you identified the barriers to active transportation. Our big roads, we have many neighborhood streets that are very walkable, very bikeable, but then you hit one of the bigger roads. That's just how our transportation system was designed. We don't have a grid system like DC or another older community, but all our neighborhood streets end up eventually in like a major arterial or a bigger connector. And if those don't have facilities, like Old Keene Mill Road, for example, has no facilities at all, that's a barrier that will prevent you from walking and biking outside your area and for active transportation. So prioritizing those type of facilities as well. So not just the area, but also the type of facility is important. The higher, for example, the vehicle count, the less comfortable a facility, or if there are roads with no facilities at all, no alternatives, those would be prioritized in the future over maybe smaller neighborhood connections, which are all totally valid. But again, we only have a limited budget, so we're trying to address some of these barriers first in coordination with VDOT, which is a whole other issue. So but we're making strides, particularly when it comes to crosswalks, and we have new tools in our toolbox when it comes to crossing big streets. For example, signals that can be placed for pedestrians that are not at an intersection, which is a new opportunity for us to improve safety.
One more thing, Rolling Road is now they've started to widen it. And I realize that's probably a VDOT road, but is there any connection with the Fairfax County plan? Because since they're constructing that road now, to add a safe bike lane that would take us to shopping at Cardinal Forest. I mean, this would be a good time to put it in.
Rolling Road, do you think?
Rolling, yeah.
Yes, Rolling Road, the widening project includes a shared use path that's safe to use for all ages and abilities. I think the crossings could potentially be improved, but without the policies in place, we don't have much leverage to ask for certain crosswalk locations that don't score high in VDOT's road design manual.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there I'm unmuted. So I'm looking for hands, and then I will have a couple of questions too. So I see Mike waving at me. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Nicole, for talking to us about this. I wish you good luck trying to make everybody happy, including us older adults. So just a couple things. I'm an older driver, I'm an older walker, and I'm an older bicycler, like Kathy. And I find that my fellow bicyclists are the worst offenders in terms of sharing the road. If I'm driving a car, they think there are cars too, even though there might be a bike lane or an unopened or an empty sidewalk. When I'm walking on the path with my fellow older adults getting exercise, they're zipping around us, they're coming up behind us. And now, of course, I don't think you mentioned it, but maybe it's part of your plan, electric bikes and scooters zipping around. It makes walking uncomfortable. I mean, I've had hazardous. Did I just lose you here? Okay. And I filled out your survey and I made some of those comments. And again, I wish you good luck trying to interpret the results from that survey, because I didn't quite know what you were getting at with some of the photos you had and what would people do in those, if you were in those situations. And then you're lucky that sitting at the other end of the table here with me is my wife, who's on the tree commission. So I have to mention her concern when you talk about widening trails, that you're not taking out too many good trees. And when you have lighting, there's an environmental impact to take advantage, to watch out for. So maybe you know about that, but I want to emphasize, the environmental aspects of what you're doing in terms of the trade-offs you have to make. So.
Sure, really good points. We do struggle, especially with the tree loss. There are many treed roads in Fairfax County that it's unfortunate. I mean, that breaks my heart every single time if there is a tree loss. Sometimes it's avoidable, sometimes it's not avoidable, but or in some cases we have waited with the project until the trees naturally died. There are treatments, a different type of surface that is a little more tree friendly, but harder to maintain. So that's a budgetary impact that could be in a tree preservation zone, for example. They're soft. It's a pervious surface that can be added instead of pavement that actually protects tree roots a lot better. But one thing we want to do is currently we take down the trees and they don't get replaced. it's just like a tree loss. But we're hoping to create policies or encourage the adoption of policies that will require those trees to be replaced in a way that is, with natural local tree species, but also provide the comfort and shade for the users of the facility. And we see, unfortunately, the tree loss when development comes in, when roads are being widened. So there's an impact and a constant conflict between our developing community as well as, trying to preserve what we have. And there's one case, for example, here at in Reston, the Fox Mill side path is being constructed, and they're actually narrowing the trail in one location to save a bigger tree. So, and I mean, eventually the tree will die, and then we can widen the trail in that location. So we are trying to make compromises. Of course, we have to keep safety in mind. And then we have on the lighting issue, as a Restonian, I'm well aware of the discussion. It has been ongoing for years about the environmental impacts, to have lights that face down, that are timed, that are motion activated, and not to have these big copper lights that really shine across the entire road, but really very focused lighting, similar to what you would find on a single family home lighting, and that would increase safety and comfort, but not necessarily have a significant impact on wildlife. So we're certainly looking into them.
We're out of time for questions, unfortunately. We have something to get on to. I just have a couple of suggestions. I'm sorry we didn't know about this before you started doing all the public outreach, so we could have informed our constituencies about it. Mike got a survey, knew about the survey, and perhaps others did, but I think, we would have had broader participation for you if we'd known about it. A point of information, you talked about funding, and I couldn't understand if you said 10 million or 10 billion with a B, so I need you to clarify that for me. And also send us best practices, if you could send us information where we could look for these best practices. So what was the money?
It's 10 billion. So
billion with the B.
Billion with a B, because $10 million get you 1 mile of trail.
Right, doesn't go far. Okay.
Yeah, no, so these type of facilities are extremely
So this is
expensive.
your budget or already approved? You're hoping to get $10 billion?
No, we don't have a budget at all. So this is the current need that we are kind of aware of.
Okay.
But there's no funding for new projects right now. We're still implementing the transportation priorities plan, which the county uses to implement capital projects, both road as well as active transportation projects. So the next round of funding would be available potentially 2026, more likely 2030. So we want to get our plan in place, so when the next round of funding comes, we can fund, it's usually in the scale of $1 billion, so $1.5 billion, that we can fund, 200, 300 active transportation projects at the same time. So we're having an updated plan, best practices in place before this funding comes, helps us, meet the needs of Fairfax County residents better.
Good. Thank you so much for being here today. Please do send us more information, and we'd love to do some background research ourselves and see what's possible. So if it comes down to testifying and saying we're in favor of things, it's nice to know what we're approving. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you so much.
On right now. Okay, it is 1:55 and it's time for old business, and I see that Director Michael Beckett of the Department of Family Services has joined us. So welcome, we're glad to have you here. And this is the time that we're going to have a conversation. A number of us in the group here participated in the groundwater training that was offered on April 17th. And so Director Beckett wanted to have a chance to talk with us about that and see what we learned and where we go from here. Thank you. Welcome. I can't hear you. We don't seem to have sound.
How is that?
There we go. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for giving me a little bit of time on your agenda. I'm actually going to all of the BACs at that fall within the Department of Family Services just to check in and see how your experience was with the groundwater presentation. I think it's helpful that for you to know that the Chief Equity Officer and I, Carla Bruce, sort of planned the opportunity for the groundwater presentation as a beginning to make sure that boards, authorities, and commissions across the county had the opportunity to have some level of fundamental knowledge around the issues of systemic and structural racism and other inequalities. We did understand that people had different levels of experiences and thinking around this particular subject area. For some, it was rather sort of basic. For some, it was enlightening. And for some, it was confirming or validating some of the things that they already knew. This is my fourth, I believe, sort of board or commission that I've come to. Again, it's just a check-in. And I'll say in the Disability Services Board, the ASSB, as well as the Commission for Women, this presentation has at least given sort of life to thinking differently already about what boards, authorities, and commissions can do to continue to sort of focus a racial or equity lens on the work of each of the BACs. Not necessarily, and I will, I'll say that in the Disability Services Board, one of the things that was talked about was how do we make sure that the issues that are sort of specific to the disabilities community doesn't get lost in the conversation about sort of race. And I think that that's important because I think there's so many, what I would call areas of marginalization and disparity, that we have to sort of recognize that the same conversation that we are having about race is related to all of those things, be it ageism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, so, et cetera, et cetera. But it is important that we do take an opportunity to examine and honor sort of those specific populations so that we are giving voice to the very specific challenges of that population of folks. And even within, like I'll say within the aging community, there are disparities between within communities just based on zip code, ethnicity, race, language, et cetera, et cetera. And so Mr. Bash, who's on this board, is also on the Disability Services Board. We are actually embarking on figuring out, like, how do we bring some similar activities for other BACs and for the community to really talk about disparities amongst within the disabled population. On the ASSB, we started talking a lot about how we examine data. What are the questions that we should be asking to make sure that we're understanding the issues that are sort of, affecting sort of multiple parts of the community. And the conversation with the Commission for Women was very specific to gender inequality. And how do we sort of look at the intersections that we have of age, race, ability, gender at the person level. And that's really where the department comes in. We're very interested in how do we serve people who walk through our doors? How do we make sure that the older African-American sort of woman who has disabilities is served and understood as a person and not just sort of one element of who she is. So I give that sort of preface to, I'm here to hear, like, are there things that the department can do to support you? Are there comments or questions that you have about the training? I just wanted to take responsibility for engaging in this conversation and not just passing it on to my team, because sometimes talking about disparities, inequalities, and especially racism can be a rather sensitive topic. So I'm here to support my staff and figure out how we can support you a little bit differently.
Okay, well, I'm going to call on people as I see hands raised, but I will just start with my initial reaction, and it's been a month now, so it's not as fresh as it was. I should have kept a copy of that survey that I filled out. One thing was just the virtual setup didn't seem as satisfying as it would have been to have this in person. The presenters were excellent, and they had a lot of charts and things to show us, and they would occasionally ask questions and people would answer in the chat, but there wasn't really the kind of back and forth and the opportunity to ask questions as much as, I found myself just, yes, I've heard a lot of this. And of course, in this past year, since the George Floyd, we've had, many, many discussions. And my husband's on the city school board here in the city of Fairfax, and the school system is talking about this. And, it's definitely in the air at the moment. But I was hoping for more examples of successful programs, successful solutions, things that people had done that worked out. Even in the shortened version you sent us to read, it talked about, we came together as a community and did something and everything changed. Well, what was it that you did that changed everything? What worked? My example that occurred to me was, in the armed services. My husband is a Navy brat, and his dad often talked about, what in World War II, and then after World War II, and Truman integrated the services. Suddenly, everybody was together. That just happened, and people had jobs and they had missions, and there was a chain of command, so there wasn't a lot of pushback on it. But it really did make a difference, especially when all those young men came back from the war, and the women who were serving at that time too. There was still a lot of resistance in this country to welcoming them back in and giving them equal opportunities. But at the time they were in the service, there was a sense of being committed to a task together. And that's what I guess I'm looking for now is, us being committed to a task together, some very specific things for us, particularly related to older adults who, are marginalized in various ways. So I will just say that we have, an extremely diverse area here, not just the county, but the cities as well. We have a very large Hispanic population, very large Asian and Pacific Islander population. We have a lot of non-English speakers. And as Tom has pointed out, we have the disabilities community too. So we'd love to see some practical things. We'd love to hear examples of what people are doing that works for them. And now I'll open it up for somebody else to talk who was there or who read the materials. If I see a hand. Nobody has anything to say? Okay, Joe, unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, Michael. This is Joe Hasty. Looking through the groundwater information, what really jumps out at you, I mean, it's over and over, chart after chart, and spikes, are the charts on incarceration rates and the police systems and the justice systems. It just explodes. I mean, as you watch the differentials in other areas such as education and health, and then all of a sudden there's this explosive line in the chart when it comes to the criminal justice system. And I'm just curious about the groundwater implications when it comes to that part of the system, the structural racism and possible attacking the problems. I was just reading just before we came on board the tremendous set of laws that were just put into and signed by the governor in Washington. And I don't know if that's an example of a groundwater effort in this particular area or not. I just wondering what your thoughts are in this particular area, especially with that tremendously spike that you see in the charts right there.
I think when taken all together, what the Racial Equity Institute has said is that you have overrepresentation of minority communities, Black and brown people in all of these areas: education, health, employment, incarceration, and the disparity between sort of Black and brown people and whites in the United States is so enormous that it's not the individual sort of behavior that it's going to sort of change the system. And that we actually should start as a community, as a society, really examining why particular policies and sort of practices are in place. Why is there an overrepresentation of minorities in the criminal justice system? What are the historical artifacts that has created that? And I think, you know, and so I will make a comment that the groundwater presentation is really the beginning of the work that the Racial Equity Institute does. And I know that Carla Bruce and I have been talking about, are there other opportunities to bring them to do some much more intensive work? Because they have a 2-day and a 3-day intensive where you actually go through sort of like almost like American history and really understanding how laws have been created to create some of the structures the way that they are. And so what the groundwater approach tells us is, let's not just look at criminal justice. Let's not just look at education. Let's not just look at the child welfare system or sort of the gaps in education, that those are all interrelated. And if we would think about it for a moment and take a step back and sort of look at all of the data that they present, that the disparities that are created early in education, the overwhelming presence of minorities in the child welfare system nationally, the education gap inevitably leads to poor outcomes for minority populations, which leads to or feeds into an overrepresentation of those populations in the criminal justice system, which is probably where you're seeing like this big boom, because you have all of these feeders into from youth and childhood into sort of where adults show up, and where they're not doing as well as we would want them to, where their success is not sort of how we would define as successful. I don't think that we would define sort of ending up in the criminal justice system as a success in many or any ways. And so I think through the lens of the groundwater approach, it's let's not disaggregate them. Let's talk about how those things are related. And you know, and just to sort of carry this on just a little bit, think about the poor outcomes for older people in Fairfax, and really in sort of in the area. So if this is the track and the pathway that many people are going, right? Black and brown people, poor outcomes in health, education, et cetera, as they get older, what's going to be their quality of life as they get older? There's financial disparity, there's which then leads to a potential over-reliance on sort of the public sort of social services structures for general sustainability. That one of the things that I've learned and through some of my work with the Racial Equity Institute is that when we think about wealth building, white communities historically have been able to build wealth because of the ability to acquire land, purchasing homes. Minority Black and brown communities have not necessarily been able to acquire wealth or build wealth through sort of home building. So, you know, I went to college and I took out student loans, and I'll probably be paying back student loans forever. But some of my friends, a friend of mine in college, his dad owned a farm, a huge farm. He farmed for Del Monte. He was able to take and potentially borrow against what he already take out equity and pay for college for his son and his daughter. And so while my friend from college and I are probably equal sort of income earners at this point in our lives, how we perceive sort of sort of how we manage money is going to be completely different, because I'm still going to have to pay backward for the things I've already done, and he's able to continue to use the money that he's earning to pay forward and continue to acquire more wealth. And that is, and so we have to sort of think a little bit differently about the impact of structural and institutional sort of disparities when we're thinking about the older population in Fairfax. There are so many people here who have generated a lot of wealth, and so as they get older, that they'll be able to take care of themselves and plan. There are some people who thought that they were doing that, but the cost of living, and we're all, people are living longer. And so people who are older are likely to run out of money. We are finding people who are living into their hundreds who plan to live into their 80s financially, and now are relying on sort of social services systems for paying for the cost of care in adult living facilities, nursing homes, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I think about sort of, this work in the Commission on Aging, I wonder how understanding this sort of from a conceptual place will cause us to think differently about what it means for the diversity of communities to age in Fairfax. And what are some of the things that we could be thinking about examining now, so that 10, 15 years from now, that there's different experiences for people as they age, and making sure that the things that we're doing, the policies that we are trying to put into place with the Board of Supervisors, structurally with county government programs, city government programs, et cetera, that they are well suited to meet the needs of a growing aging population, sort of well beyond our time spent in county government, that we're planning now for the people who are behind us in age and in position, so that the quality of life is better, that we are thinking differently about how sort of minority groups are going to experience aging in Fairfax in the same way that we're thinking very generally and very broadly, but simultaneously, what about the language disparity? What about the economic disparities that exist within the aging population now? And I think I answered your question. I definitely went off topic, but I'm willing to come back to center if I didn't answer your question, Mr. Hasty.
No, you absolutely provided me a few more things to think about. Thank you.
And when I was asking earlier about best practices to give us a picture, an image of what it could be, and what you just talked about, I recently heard a podcast about the Black farmers movement. That there are in North Carolina and in upstate New York. There are a couple of farms that are reaching out to bring young people in and train them how to farm. I mean, they say, well, going back to the time when there was supposed to be help after the Civil War, and the idea of the 40 acres that everybody was going to get, and that promise was broken, that means that the Black people at that time were shut out of property ownership, which is the beginning of wealth building. So the farmers now are really reaching out and saying the land is important, having the land, working the land, and being able to feed our own communities. So they're not only training new farmers, but they're addressing the food desert problem in some of the communities in the cities. They're really trying to reach out and get kids involved in growing vegetables. And this is something near and dear to my heart because I'm a gardener. So I love that. So that's the kind of example I'm thinking of. And the other thing that came to mind is we had a presentation by Karen Hannigan recently about the phenomenon of bullying within congregate living situations, people. And something she said stuck with me, which is that you don't solve it by yelling at the bullying person, and you don't solve it with the person who's being bullied. bullied. You solve it with all the people around them, the bystanders. So you educate them on how to stand up and say something when you see it. So to my mind, our participation in One Fairfax and the equity program has to do with standing up when we see something, pushing back and saying, maybe there's a different way to do this, because we see that, people are being left out, or people are being shunted aside or discounted. Their voices are not being heard. And that's where we're connected to our communities and can maybe do something about that. Kay, I see you joined us late. Welcome. So Sharon, we have a couple more minutes here for this.
I'm wondering if anybody has done any serious looking at the impact of the new Safeway store down on Route 1. One of my concerns from way back is when people live in neighborhoods where there is no access to, for example, grocery stores. So instead they have to get on the bus with their 2 kids and ride the bus to the big grocery store, or go to the little local place on the corner that charges 3 times the amount of money for milk and bread and whatever. And I'm sure this is an economic factor, but what is the impact of a big new grocery? I mean, this is probably 2 or 3 years old now, but that big Safeway on Route 1 surely had some kind of an impact on some of the people of color in that community. It seems to me that that's the kind of advocacy we can do for economic development. I guess it is.
No, I think you're right. And while I definitely don't have the details, there has been a lot of energy put into what's happening in the Route 1 corridor, especially around food security, food deserts,
Right.
especially also about access to fresh fruits and vegetables and things of that nature. And as there was a conversation that I was in not long after I got to Fairfax, which seems not so long ago, but it was about 18 months ago, where we were talking about the rapid bus system that was being planned for Richmond Highway and access to grocery stores, because there was, at least back then, there was a conversation that one of the main grocery stores down there was considering closing. And what impact was that going to have on the community to access fresh food without having to travel so far, especially when transportation is such an issue. And, this area traffic, I'm still trying to get used to the traffic in Northern Virginia. But if you have to sort of navigate grocery shopping on the bus in this area, it's even worse.
And that's even worse when you're an older adult than when you're a young mother who has got to whatever. But
and so I think what's helpful is it's this type of thinking that what we hope we can continue to support is infusing additional information about sort of the disparities that exist in ways that you're interested in incorporating that information into your dialogue, your advocacy, your representations to members of the Board of Supervisors and other officials as you are discharging your duties under the charge of the County Board of Supervisors. And that our team at DFS is here to make sure that that folks are here to provide you with the type of information you think is going to be helpful, if it exists, because sometimes the data that we're looking for, the information that we want, doesn't exist in the way that we would hope it would, to disaggregate data by race, by age, by gender. But I come to say we're here to be helpful and to help you think through how to integrate One Fairfax intentionally in the deliberations that you have here.
Thank you. I see Tara's hand up.
Hi there. I just wanted to quickly say, Carolyn, you asked about best practices, and I think this group is in a spectacularly unique position with the Shape the Future of Aging plan in terms of literally shaping the future. And so, you're in a position to ask the questions as we build programs You know, if all the voices are at the table, are we hearing everybody? And if, you know, asking if these plans unintentionally are, you know, continuing to marginalize certain groups and making sure that that's not happening. So by asking those questions and having this lens to look at things through, I think you guys are in a really unique position to be able to do that.
Exactly.
Good. Well, that's our intention. So thank you very much for coming. Oh, Kathy Cole.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I find this all incredibly overwhelming. The issues that have to be dealt with are mind-boggling. Starting with the young and re-educating with the, I don't know if this is the correct term, the critical race theory in the schools, and then move. I mean, and then you talk about the economic disparities, and you talk about the housing disparities. I mean, it's all there. You can't just pick people up and move them to another spot. I mean, this is just mind-boggling, the fix that we have gotten ourselves into. And I could talk about why, but I won't. But it has to do with a lot of arrogance. But anyway, I think what Carolyn was saying in the beginning was best practices. If we could see some examples of communities who have made even the minutest difference that could take away some of this overwhelming feeling of helplessness and focus on something, I would find that incredibly helpful.
So I have two comments, and I think I'm going to end because I'm sure you guys manage your agenda like it should be managed. I love it. So two things. One, I'll take that comment directly back to the Chief Equity Officer. I'm definitely not the expert, and I want to make sure that I'm getting some subject matter expertise on how we sort of start thinking about what it means to be successful and how we benchmark ourselves against other places. And I'll commit to making sure that we bring some information back to the Commission on Aging to start really thinking through what does it mean, what are we looking for around best practices, but I want to talk to the Chief Equity Officer about that. The other thing is I really appreciate a couple of things that you said. One, to really characterize it as overwhelming. I think you're right. It is all consuming. And I like that, and I appreciate sort of the personal accountability that you use in your words when you talk about what we have created as a society, right? And I think that as opposed to this is what's been done to us, when we start taking ownership for the things that we have done, then we then put ourselves in a different sort of mindset to really try to address the problem. And that's what I want to sort of, the last thing I'll talk about just for about 10 seconds is this idea of the problem. I've been been fortunate to be invited to an annual symposium called the Wicked Problems Institute. And it centers specifically on the challenges of the disparities that we see in the child welfare system. And it's chaired by a colleague of mine who's a professor at the University of Chicago and has a double appointment at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And when you talked about the problem, it made me realize that one of the things that we have to at least consider is that the problems that we sit and try to solve, regardless of what board authority or commission that we're on, to provide advice, or even the roles that I hold and Tara holds, that the problems that we're trying to solve are wicked, which means that they do not have a singular solution, that the problem is multidimensional and the solutions are probably sort of greater in its dimensions to really solve those problems.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Phyllis.
I've got one more person, but really we do need to move on. Phyllis, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm sitting here like Kathy, ready to explode. I was very involved in New York in the race riots in the late 60s, and it had a profound effect on my life. I ran a clinic at Mount Sinai. We serve the East Harlem community. My life has been partially devoted to this whole issue. I find it unbelievable that we are here at this point in time. And I find little things. I mean, we can have an all-day seminar on this and talk about these things. And your group is talking about it, and this group is talking about it. Mike and Mike, I just thought of this a little while ago. We're talking about a film festival. How do we get senior people together? I can give you, as a therapist, I'm a mental health therapist, I could give you tons of examples of things that happened that when they were not talked about, developed behaviors that were absolutely out of control if they were not addressed. One of the things that I would like to see us do, we're talking about, again, a film festival, but I'm sitting here thinking, why aren't we calling small seminars, together of people starting out? Maybe it wouldn't be multiracial at first. Maybe it would be racial issues, and having forums. And I'm not just talking about, our commission. I'm talking about in the supervisor's office or wherever, a bigger scope of things, that we develop talking forums and get information and really see how people feel. And then we can bring together, multiracial groups and really kind of talk about what really is hurting people. Where do we go from here? And I think that, to me, is grassroots. All of us could sit here in our ivory towers and pontificate about all the different academic reasons. And I'm sorry, I feel like Kathy. It's like we need to start in the grass. And if we could start that, and maybe Mike and I, we're talking about a film festival, are any of those films, which we'll talk about in a little while, do they address any racial issues? They address isolation, they address, getting older, but let's get a list of films that attempt to address these. And I know recently there have been some, after Black Lives Matter and all that, which is fantastic. But that's where I think we could put our everyday energies right now. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. There's obviously much more to do now, but we will thank Director Becketts for coming and joining us today. We appreciate it. It seems like we've given you a few things to take back with you. And this conversation will undoubtedly continue. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You have a great afternoon.
All right, we have used up a lot of our old business time, but that was a good conversation, I think. The next thing on here is commissioner updates. So I think, Diane, you had something quickly?
Right, we had another DFF informational session, raised our numbers to 179. We'll have another one tonight at 6 o'clock and another one still tomorrow at 10:30. I went to the Mental Health Awareness Day on May 6th, the National Agency on Aging, and there was a speaker there, Ashton Applewhite. If I had never heard of her before, but if you get a chance, she does TED Talks, go for her. I won't say anything else, but that was an enlightening conversation there. And NVAN was the third one yesterday. The meeting was devoted to determining and voting what priorities we would have with the budget and legislative platforms. So that's my update.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple of things. I was at the Human Services Council meeting last night. There was a question asked there. Chris Leonard, who's the new Deputy County Executive for the HHSS group, was asked about mental health. They had talked last month about the mental health among the youth and how they were going to really have to wait until school was back in session to get an assessment of that. And the same situation somebody asked about older adults. They said, you know, really the occasional phone call or a visit from the meals delivery people is not doing the job for finding out how folks are really doing. So they're looking now, they were thinking about September for reopening the adult day healthcare. They're now hoping they can do that sooner. So they're going to start talking about it this in coming weeks, he said. But the good news is that 85 to 90% of the 65 plus population in the Fairfax area has been vaccinated now, which just gives us a lot more options for not us personally and the people that we serve. The other part of that meeting last night was a presentation by Chief Equity Officer Carla Bruce and Sharon Arendt of the Health Department about the vaccine equity clinics, which I didn't know anything about, was excited to hear that they have been sending out since the beginning, since we started getting the really dreadful results and they began analyzing where the disease was most prevalent in the county. They put together mobile clinics or vaccination sites in churches and other places, large places that were available. They started right away just going down there outside of that online registration system that, you know, people who have computers were using to set up appointments. She said they stuck to the eligibility requirements for the age. They didn't take people out of order from that. But within that, they didn't require pre-registration. They just, you know, they got groups of people. They went down and they had interpreters and they visited Black churches and, you know, various other communities, the Asian community, with people who spoke their languages and could talk to them about the importance of vaccination and get them out to participate in that. So I was trying to find here my notes. Oh, too many pieces of paper here. They had, in March, there were 51 clinics held at 16 sites and 9,500 people registered or received a first dose at that time. The clients that month were 39% Hispanic, 21% Black, African American, 17% Asian, 13% white, and 10% other. And then in April, there were 93 vaccine equity clinics held at 26 sites, and over 16,000 people registered or received first doses. They didn't have the breakdown that, but in general, you know, the vaccine equity clinics, the group that they were serving was 38.6% Spanish-speaking Hispanic versus the proportion of those folks in the overall population is 15.3%. So they were really turning out for these clinics. And the same with the African American community, 9.8% of our population, but 21.3% of the people who came to the equity clinics. So they've really been making a difference. And that was exciting to hear about and something we didn't really know. So that's the kind of project that I think is really wonderful to hear about and you know, a best practice, right? They just, you know, they identified where the disease was and they got out there with people on the ground with shots to put in arms. So good for them. I would like to take just a minute here before I ask anybody else to report. Oh, Jackie's got her hand up.
Well, I don't want to interrupt you, Carolyn. I was going to intrude with a formality.
We didn't vote on the minutes. I know we didn't vote on the minutes.
I also, when you get to that, then we need to, for the record, have Kay state where she's calling in from. I'm sorry, but they're being very strict about FOIA requirements. Sorry to interrupt this fascinating discussion with my rules.
Sarah is willing to hold off for a few minutes here. I will finish with what I want to do, which is a good, thank you, Tara. I wanted to, I don't know, there's no way to express how wonderful the work was that has been done over the last 10 years by the Livable Communities Development team, Jackie's team. The department has now been reorganized and people from that team have gone to other places. Jackie, thank goodness, is still with us, and Hilda is still with us. And Jackie has also now the VICAP people, Maria and her team, they're excellent folks. But some of the people that we worked with closely in our operations have are still here. They're just in different positions now. But I wanted to just take an opportunity. You had this in your packet, but this just, you know, congregate nutrition, 2.2 million meals provided over a 10-year period. Family caregiver support, nearly 200 seminars and webinars. Assisted transportation, nearly 5,000 round trips to older adults and 17,500 hours of respite to their family caregivers. Community and multicultural outreach and engagement, 50 plus community ambassadors. I think that includes our millennial ambassadors as well. So that was Linda's team and still going strong. Person-focused contract support for legal services and home assistive equipment. Discretionary funds have provided nearly 600 assistive items. Board support, supporting the Fairfax Area Commission on Aging and the Board of Supervisors Older Adults Committee. 31 50 plus community action plan initiatives developed. We were part of that. Legislative and advocacy analysis and education. I'm seeing an average of 20 to 60. Virginia, this is in yellow, it's hard to read. Virginia senators and delegates at the annual legislative breakfast that held. I mean, there's much more to it and you can read the whole chart, but I just wanted to say bravo to Jackie and to all of the folks who worked with her, and Godspeed to the ones that we won't be seeing as often, but we certainly appreciate and celebrate the work that you did over this 10 years and good for you. Okay.
Thank you for that, Hilda. Carolyn, I'm looking at Hilda with her party. I will certainly pass that on to the members who had been with the LCD team, and they have been sad that they may not see you as often. They really enjoyed their intersection with you all, so thank you. Really appreciate that.
Well, they know when we meet, so if they feel like dropping by on the third Wednesday, we'd be delighted to have them in the audience.
They would love to stalk you.
So let me, before I introduce Tara, just very quickly go back and say we need to approve the minutes from the April meeting. I had no corrections myself. Does anybody else have any corrections or additions to those minutes? Okay, no. I would like to have a motion to approve the minutes from April. Somebody raise your hand. Martha makes the motion. Kay seconds the motion. Okay, we'll have a hand count then for all in favors. Raise your hand. Aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are approved, and we will add to the minutes from this meeting also. Kay, just unmute yourself and tell us your name and who you represent and where you're calling from. You're still muted. Can't hear you. Hilda, can you unmute her? She have to do it herself.
Here, I'll go down.
There you are. Okay, got it.
I'm Kay Larmer. I'm calling from my home in McLean, and I represent the Drainsville district.
Okay, good. Because Tara is scheduled to give her report now, Mike and Phyllis, can I have you wait just a couple minutes? We'll have that report and then we'll do the film festival. Okay, Tara, the floor is yours.
Hi there, everybody. Hope you're doing well. That was such a sweet tribute to Livable Communities Development, and I can assure you that those programs are still there and those people are still there, and there will absolutely be room for intersection in the future. I know that it looks a little different, that's true. So, but I don't want you to think that there won't be room for intersection. So I just wanted to say that. Couple of updates I did want to mention regarding the active transportation plan presentation. If anybody had questions on that, please go ahead and send them to Jackie. She's going to be following up with Nicole, and if anybody had questions, we want to make sure that Jackie has them so she can ask them. I did want to update you. Last time I told you that we were anticipating getting some funding for the Ombudsman program, and we did receive the funding award notification for that. So there's going to be $49,765 awarded to be used to support the long-term care Ombudsman program. That will allow for some technology needs and some training and marketing at the long-term care ombudsman program, and some other things that will build awareness of the program. And then we are still waiting award letters for the American Rescue Plan funding and the vaccine response funding. We haven't gotten those yet, so we don't know amounts still. There's some additional steps that happen with the General Assembly this round in the authorization process, and then it has to route to the Department of Planning and Budget before appropriations are approved. So I'll keep you posted on that front once we receive notification about those funds. I did want to mention to you that there has been a scheduled older adults committee meeting. That will be a brief meeting scheduled for June 15th at 1:30. Supervisor Harity has indicated that this meeting will be in person, but we aren't sure exactly how that will look. So as in the past, Supervisor Harity would like the COA to be present for the discussion. And if it is held in the Board of Supervisors auditorium, then the COA would likely sit in those front press rows to be distanced. So we will absolutely share more information once we have it, but we just wanted to put that on your radar. Some of the topics at that meeting are going to include a brief summary of the COVID-19 response plan for older adults and the updates on those initiatives, a discussion about administering a potential new survey. We know that the last survey was done a couple years ago and was pre-COVID, and we also know that COVID kind of turned everything upside down, right? And that could have an impact on what people see as a baseline for need in the future. So we know that there may be a need for a new baseline survey. And then there will be discussion about administering or a new timeline for relaunching the Shape the Future of Aging plan. So we hope to, we see that we're going to be doing a little bit of a pivot to activate our planning again for Shape the Future of Aging, which is amazing news. So I wanted to alert you on that. Just as a reminder, for the Shape the Future of Aging process, I know there was the survey to start, and then there was a launch of the Shape the Future of Aging plan. And then there was a website developed, and community forums and focus groups were scheduled. So we will develop together a timeline along those lines, kind of similar to how it looked before. But, you know, we need to be strategic about timing, and you all have great insight around that. So there will be future discussion to come on that. That is all I have for you today.
Tara. Does anybody else have an update from a different organization before I turn it over to Mike and Phyllis for a few minutes here? Okay, the floor is yours, you two.
I'll just make a quick introduction and background. Kudos to you, Carolyn, for remembering that we had talked about an older adult film festival pre-COVID. And, you know, when I made my remarks at Supervisor Harity's reading of the proclamation of Old Americans Month and Adult Abuse Prevention Month, I mentioned that there were at least 3 Best Picture nominees this year for the Academy Awards that had a theme in one way or another related to older adults. And that got Phyllis and I brainstorming about trying to revisit this issue again and try to figure out how to do it. Is this something the county could participate in, and as a way to get older adults talking about issues? So, you know, my background, you know, I'm an engineer. Phyllis is a mental health therapist. That seems to be an interesting combination since I'm married to a mental health therapist. So maybe, you know, we can get the analytical kind of people thinking along with the touchy-feely people thinking about issues when they look at these movies. So Phyllis, you want to take over and talk about some of the ways and get some feedback quickly in the time available?
You need to unmute.
I've also talked Dr. Richard Hilburn, a geriatrician, into joining us. I think, you know, we've done some podcasts with the medical and the mental health. Anyway, I would like to see if we start advertising the film festival. The films were great, and I saw one, The Father, and I thought, I don't know if anyone has seen this film yet, but it was brilliant, because you walk away feeling like, quote unquote, the patient. You were confused, you were unclear, you were frustrated. It was Anthony Hopkins did, and he won the award, right, Mike? I mean, for that, it just unbelievable. And then the other one was No Man's Land, which I saw the other night. And these are films that we should all see as a commission anyway, you know. But I think what we would like to do, it's easy to advertise a Zoom film festival. I've done many of them with the Washington School of Psychiatry, and they just advertise and they say that here's the film, we'd like you to watch it, and this is when the discussion is going to occur. And it's really simple in this day and age of Zoom to have wonderful participation. You know, we've had 40, 50 people on, and it was wonderful. So I think it seems simple to me, Mike, but I don't know if you've had any other thoughts about advertising, but I think that's up to, you know, how do we want to go further than us and bring it to the larger community. I'm talking about in terms of advertising this. You were going to look into Mason's Ollie program too. Did you contact?
I didn't contact. I was doing some looking to see if they have something like this already, and it did not look like they had it yet. But yeah, I'm wondering, you know, is this something the can be picked up by the virtual senior center? I don't know, you know, if that's a venue.
That's a possibility too.
Yeah.
It sounds as though the two of you need to come up with you know, several options and then bring it back to us, or take it to Ollie, or take it to the virtual the Center for Active Adults. I think it's a great idea. We just need to figure out where the films are available, and then, you know.
Well, they're all on. People would watch them on their own on
Right,
Netflix or Amazon.
Not everybody
Prime.
has every streaming service.
Right, that was one of the challenges.
That was one of the things that we talked about, the person that doesn't have that.
Okay, we don't have a lot of time to discuss this, unfortunately, right now. Martha, you have a question?
Just briefly, Redbox has Nomadland.
Redbox, so if you want to get a disc, you can see it that way.
And of course, it doesn't have to be these movies. There's a lot of older movies. That
Right.
really
You might even want to look back and start with some from along, you know, the 40s or 50s. And
I'm not going back that far, but okay. Yeah, so we're throwing this out because if people, I know there wouldn't be a lot of time for discussion, but if people get ideas on how to make this happen and make it happen, you know, effectively, just email us, I guess, in a
we should
FOIA-proof way.
Right.
FOIA-proof way.
And I think I just want to know, are we going to adapt this idea? I mean, officially. So do we need to take?
I think we like the idea. I don't know if it's time to vote on it or if we need more specifics. What do you all think? You want to have a motion now?
Sounds.
Kathy?
I'd like to have a motion that we sort of like have a little subcommittee of Mike and Phyllis to explore the possibility of having a film festival that would deal with issues that are of concern to older adults in our community, both age and societal.
Right.
I second it.
That sounds like a motion and a second. So all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Looks like the motion passes.
And if anyone wants to join us, let me know. Mike.
Yeah, if you would like to be on the committee with Phyllis and Mike, the problem is FOIA. So we have to ask whether it's possible for 3 people to meet together.
That's right. I was just going to say, you make it sound so simple, Phyllis. Everyone is welcome, but if you have more than 2 of you, I'll have to do some work. We'll have to advertise. We will. Just let me know, and we'll need some advance notice on that. Okay.
Okay. Were there any other old business things?
I would just like to, go back to the film festival. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think another most important part of that, though, is to have a formalized discussion group. So when people do watch it, they have the opportunity to talk about everything they just heard and saw and what futures people have. And that to me is a really critical part of this film festival.
Yeah, Kay, that's what we're gonna do. Mike, myself, and Dr. Hilburn would be the discussants. And then we also had an idea, the owner of the, what's it called? The Live Arts Theater?
Cinema Arts.
Cinema Arts, and he always hosts things like this. So if things open up, I think Mike talked about approaching him and or both of us or whatever, and opening it up that way as well, because he's had discussion groups. But that was the whole point of it.
Right. And also, I think involving a caregiver who has gone through a lot.
Kathy Cole, one more.
One more. AERP has had those movies for old movies for adults series, and I can see this being similar, but having a live discussion afterwards, not a chat discussion.
Yes.
Right. Well, ideally, we would be able to go to the movie theater together and then, sit there and have a cup of coffee and talk. So, well, I don't know how long it'll take to make that possible. So we might have to do the Zoom route first until folks are comfortable.
I have a projector and a screen.
We can go, I'll go to Kathy's backyard.
That's not a bad idea.
Not a bad idea. Let's think about that. We're running out of time here and I need to be able, our captioner will leave us right on the dot. So I want to be sure we get everything in here. Where were we? We were on old business. Is there any other old business, any other report from someone who went to a meeting? If not, I will move on to the new business. We just agreed on this today, which is the virtual Governor's Virtual Conference on Aging, which is happening next week. I sent everybody a copy of this with all the session names, and I did hear back from several people. So I have a version here with the ones that have been identified so far. Mike had a long list. So there'll be 4 of us who will be going there. So it's Martha, Kathy Muha, me, and Diane Watson, who had to leave us early today. So what I would encourage you, since we don't have a lot of time to talk about this now, unless you want to tell me right here on the spot, and I will make a note of your choices. If you have that list in front of you and you have picked something, Phyllis, you have something?
The one on isolation, it's probably been obviously chosen.
It has been circled so far away, addressing social isolation.
Right.
Okay. We've got 3 sets of initials on that now, so that will definitely be one. My thought is with 4 of us, we can divvy these up and ensure that someone goes to each of these sessions. Sharon.
Tuesday, aging together, Tuesday, senior housing, and Thursday, building capacity to meet behavioral needs.
So senior housing, that makes 4 of us who want that one. And what was the third one?
Building capacity to meet mental health.
That's on Thursday. Okay.
Yeah.
So SD on there. So I'm putting.
And did you get the aging together one on Tuesday?
I did.
Okay.
So we have 2 requests for that one and 2 requests for the building capacity. I mean, I'll tell you the ones that have been asked for so far. So it's on Monday at 11, so far away, addressing social isolation during the pandemic and beyond. Monday at 1 o'clock, livable communities that promote community access, inclusion, and engagement. Tuesday, 11:15, let's disrupt ageism and develop elderhood. 1 o'clock on Tuesday, intersections of diversity and ageism and aging together, age-friendly communities. Okay, at 2:45 on Tuesday, senior housing, trans issues and options. On 3:30 on Tuesday, transportation for the ages. What do you do for the aging? What do you do when you need help? Also at 3:30, the impact of the BRA care consultation program. On Wednesday at 10 a.m., the intersection. At 11:30, changing the culture of care for African Americans living with dementia. Also at 11:30, collaborating to embed falls prevention programs into the community. At 2 o'clock, accessing services in the digital world. At 3:30, financial exploitation, how to prevent abuse by people who make decisions for you. And on Thursday, at 9:30, COVID-19 in geriatrics, brain behavior and disparity concerns. At 9:30, also, it takes a village, 3 villages in Northern Virginia. I don't know who those are, but they're probably people we know. At 11 on Thursday, low-cost home modifications to prevent falls. And at 12 on Thursday, building capacity to respond to behavioral health needs, and also protecting older adults from fraud and financial loss. So those are the ones that were highlighted now. I don't really have time to get commitments. What I would like to do is have the 4 of us who are going say which of those we're interested in, and then I think I will just make assignments, so that nobody will be, at the same time having to go to 2 different sessions. But we'll try to get that set up before things start on Monday, if that's okay with you, Kathy Muha and Martha Cooper and me and Diane, okay? So you'll hear from me, but any of you who have not yet made a suggestion, please do so in the next day or so. Send it to me so I can add it to the list that we're going to divide up and cover. Then we'll come back in June and give you a short, or either we'll do it before, we'll write it up and send it to you, or we'll come back and give you a short report on what happened at the conference. Okay? We have 3 minutes for announcements. So does anyone have an announcement on the commission? And then I will look and see if any of our visitors have one. I have an announcement, which is that the new website vaccines, plural, vaccines.gov is where you can go and put in your zip code and have get the providers that are nearest to you, whether it's CVS or Safeway or a doctor's office. You can find out where you can get your vaccine. I believe they're also still running the vaccine clinic up at the old Lord and Taylor in Tyson's Corner. But you would probably need to check with the health department on that. Again, that's walk-in. You don't have to register for those. Okay, in our audience, I see Eileen McCartan. Do you have an announcement for us?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for arranging the captions. And if you didn't know already, you can drag those captions if they're in front of somebody's face. You can pull and drag them. But thank you for arranging them. I appreciate it.
Well, that allows me also to thank our captioner today before she departs.
Yes.
So we appreciate
Thank you, captioner.
2 sessions she's done for us and done it very well. So thank you. Do I have anyone else? I'm looking now. Usual suspects for an announcement. I don't see any other hands. So I am going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Who would like to do that? Sharon Dreyer, I can't hear you, but I believe you're moving to adjourn. And a second? Kay Larmer, seconds, and all in favor, raise your hand. Say aye if you're not muted, but raise your hand. All in favor of adjourning, all opposed to adjourning? The motion carries. We are adjourned. I look forward to seeing you in June. And some of you I'll see on Zoom at the conference, or we'll be in touch anyway. So take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.